Hello students, today we are beginning with the poem Sohrab and Rustum by Matthew Arnold. Matthew Arnold was a very famous poet. He was the son of Thomas Arnold. He has received his education from the Oxford University. He served for 35 years as the inspector of schools, and due to this job specifically, he has got a very broad exposure of the social life of England, as his primary task was to travel and observe the things throughout the country. And because of this exposure of the social norms or social conditions of England, many of his later works were based on this experience of his. He has also served as professor of poetry at Oxford. Later on, he turned towards prose. The major works of Arnold include Thesis, Rugby Chapel, Essays in Criticism and Culture and Anarchy, and the last two being prose works. This poem Sohrab and Rustum, this is a blank verse poem, and it is an extract which is here in your syllabus from the long narrative poem which was published in 1853. And in this poem, Arnold has recreated the story of Sohrab and Rustum, which was originally written by Persian poet Firdausi in his Shahnama. The poem presents a very sad situation in the life of Sohrab and Rustum. Actually, the story goes like this, that this Sohrab and Rustum was a very famous warrior, soldier of Persian army, and once upon a time it has happened that he has lost his horse, and in search of his horse he enters the neighboring kingdom of Samangan, and he meets the princess of that kingdom, and she admires Rustum for his reputation, for his valor, for his bravery and all these things, and she has a deal with Rustum that she will be the mother of his child, and in return she will tell him the address of his horse. And just to seal this occasion with some memory, Rustum gives some tokens to her, and he says that if it happens to be a girl, then she has to wear another kind of token, and a jewel in her hair, and if she has a boy, then she will have to bind the token to the arm of that boy. Princess Tahmina gives birth to the child who is named as Sohrab. Years go side by side, but the father could not meet his son, or means there was no connection between them. Finally, there happens to be a war between Persia and Turan, and these two armies face each other, and one was led by the father and another was led by the son. Sohrab has also become a very famous fighter of Turan army, and the legend of Rustum was still there, and he was a very famous warrior of Persia. So in the course of fight, it happens that Sohrab and Rustum face each other in man-to-man fight, and during the course of the fight, Rustum stabs his own son. but only after this act of stabbing or this act of piercing the heart of his son, he sees that necklace which he has given to Tahmina, and he realizes that, oh, this is my own son. And so this poem is all about that. But the extract which we have in this poem, it begins from that point of time when Rustam is dying and Sohrab is standing by his side, and what they are experiencing or what is happening there is the theme of this poem. The theme says that it is very sad kind of emotions were portrayed in this poem, and later on such kind of illustrations were given which tell us that all the things are going on their own, like as if no one cares that what happens there. The tragedy happens to be quite personal to Rustam only. So the poem goes that he spoke, and Sohrab smiled on him, and took the spear and drew it from his side, and eased his wound's imperious anguish. But the blood came welling from the open gash, and life flowed with the stream. All down his cold white side the crimson torrent ran, dim now and soiled, like the soiled tissue of white violets, left freshly gathered on their native bank by children whom their nurses called with haste indoors from the sun's eye. His head drooped low, his limbs grew slack, motionless, white he lay, white with eyes closed, only when heavy gasps, deep heavy gasps, quivering through all his frame, convulsed him back to life. He opened them and fixed them feebly on his father's face. Till now all strength was ebbed, and from his limbs unwillingly the spirit fled away, regretting the warm mansion which it left, and youth and bloom and this delightful what. So the very first stanza describes the moment when the father pierces the body of his son with that spear, and after that when he realizes that, oh, this is my own son, so what he feels or what are the circumstances there are narrated by Arnold. He said he spoke, means this comes from the continuation of that long poem Sohrab and Rustam. So he spoke means whatever he had spoken in the earlier paragraph, it starts from that place. And Sohrab smiled on him, and took the spear and drew it from his side, and eased his wound's imperious anguish. He spoke means Rustam spoke something, and Sohrab smiled on him. Means before this, after piercing his body with that spear, they had a talk in the previous paragraphs of the poem, previous stanzas of the poem. So he spoke, means Rustam spoke something, and then Sohrab smiled on him and took the spear and drew from his side, and then he took hold of that spear and drew it from his side, means pulled out it from his side, from his wound, and eased his wound's imperious anguish. And from doing this, means from pulling the spear out of his wound, he just tries to ease that anguish, that pain which he is feeling. And what kind of pain? Imperious. Imperious means overbearing, means that pain which was overbearing for him, because the word imperial is used for imperious, imperial also means regal, which is royal in nature. So वो जो royal anguish थी है ना, उसका जो एक शाही जो पीड़ा, शाही जो तकलीफ वो महसूस कर रहा था, मीन जस्ट टू show that bravery of Sohrab, or the way in which Sohrab had spoken the previous stanza, that how bravely he was facing that anguish or that pain or that wound given by his own father, and for which, relating to that stanza, he says that that wound was a royal kind of wound, royal kind of anguish he was having. But the blood came welling from the open gas, and life flowed with the stream. But as he pulled out that spear from that wound, along with that spear, come welling, WELL, well means that source of water which we have in our farms, कुएं से जैसे पानी निकल के आता ना प्रेशर से बाहर, in the same manner welling came the blood from the open gas, from the open wound, and life flowed with the stream, and with that stream of blood life also came out of Sohrab. And life flowed with the stream all down his cold white side. The crimson torrent ran, dim now and soiled. It says, as just it came out of that, all down his cold white side. Now that white side, it has turned cold because it is lifeless. It has turned white because it is bloodless. So all through that side, the crimson torrent run. That crimson, that red colored flow of blood ran through the sides of Sohrab. Dim now and soiled. When it was coming out of the body, it was red. But when as it was soaked by the soil, so it dimmed and soiled. It is dim now and soiled. The blood which was coming out of the body was quite crimson, it was flowing with a force, but as soon as it was soaked by the soil, so it has turned a bit dim and it was soiled also. Like the soiled tissue of white violets left freshly gathered on their native bank by children whom their nurses call with haste indoors from the sun's eye. He says, in the same manner, here he presents an analogy that like the violets, the white color of violet flowers, which were gathered by the children, and when they were called by their nurses abruptly from their play in a haste, so when they left those violets there out on the banks of the garden or the river, then how they seem dimmed, ना, क्योंकि वो कुछ देर पहले उन्होंने वहाँ से इकट्ठे कर लिए थे और तोड़ चुके थे उनको, तो उनका जो कलर है वो धीरे धीरे डिम हो जाता. सो इन द सेम मैनर दैट डिम colored soiled body was there. His head drooped low, his limbs grew slack, and as the effect was taking place, means as the blood was flowing out, as the life was flowing out, his head drooped low and his limbs grew slack. Slack means weak. Motionless white he lay, and as if some white motionless piece of thing it was, he was lying there, white with eyes closed. He was lying there with his eyes closed. Only when heavy gasps, deep heavy gasps, quivering through all his frame, convulsed him back to life, he opened them. And he says he opened his eyes only when some deep flow of blood came convulsing out of his body, throughout his body, and then only he opened his eyes. यानी जब जब खून जो था वो उसके पूरे शरीर में से कन्वल्ज होके और एक फव्वारे की तरह से और वो निकल रहा था, तब he opened them and fixed them feebly on his father's face. And then he looked feebly, means in a very weak manner, towards the face of his father. Till now all strength was ebbed, and from his limbs unwillingly the spirit fled away. It says, till now all the strength of Sohrab was fled away, it has drenched, it was apt, it was flowed out with the blood, and from his limbs unwillingly the spirit flew away, and ultimately he was dead. The spirit has left his limbs, has left his body unwillingly. Now, this is what where the poet is trying to suggest that even the death was not happy, or even the death was not ready to leave that body or to make that person dead. Such a valorous, such a brave man he was, regretting the warm mansion which it left. And the spirit, even it was regretting that warm mansion, that warm body which it has left, and youth and bloom and this delightful world. The spirit was regretting the youth, the youthful Sohrab, the bloom, the youngness which it was experiencing so far in the body of Sohrab, and this delightful world. Everything, the body, the youth, the vigor, the energy of Sohrab was missed by the spirit, and it has regretted it, that I am leaving this all behind. Okay, thank you.